Let's do this, people. It is time for the Kaufman Corner podcast, brought to you, as always, by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals anywhere on the planet. That's what you get here with the Kaufman Corner. It is covered like no one else, right? What so much to cover right now, as a matter of fact. Proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear. That's right. They're gone. In Kansas City since 1994, free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online right now at ganasphalt.com or call them at 816-485-3338. Your business has a parking lot. You need GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at ganasphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot. Let's talk some Royals baseball with the good doctor, Rany Jazayerli. He is with us here, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. You can check out my radio show from 2 to 6 Central Time at 810WHB.com. We've got a lot we want to cover. The Royals have a pitching coach, even have an assistant pitching coach. Brian Sweeney's in as the top dog. Zach Bowe for the Minnesota Twins, the assistant pitching coach. Free agency is well underway. I don't know if the Royals know it, but it is. It's well underway. We'll talk about that. The MLB winter meetings, they have begun. Rule 5 draft. That's on Wednesday. We've got actually some real news to dig into, Rany. How about it? What do you think? We've got names. We've got resumes. What do you think of what the Royals were able to get done when it comes to the top dogs when their pitching needs help? Did they get the help they needed?
Well, as they did with the manager search, they took their sweet time, but came in right under the wire. I think last show I predicted the Royals would have a pitching coach by Wednesday, and said I'd be really worried if they didn't have one by Friday. I woke up Thursday morning prepared to throw up an orange flag at least, and sure enough, the news came, and I think I like it. I mean, I didn't know a ton about Brian Sweeney. My first thought was, I don't know. All I knew was, okay, he's from the Cleveland Guardians. That doesn't surprise us one bit, and not necessarily in a bad way, but it was just that's one of the organizations that has done an excellent job of developing pitching over the last 5 years or so. But also, obviously, John Sherman's connections there. Matt Quatrero has a background there. Although, interestingly enough, they actually did not overlap in Cleveland, I believe. I believe Brian Sweeney joined the organization right around the time Quatrero went back to Tampa Bay. So
Right.
in a way, that might be a good sign in the sense that he's not hiring a buddy of his. John Sherman was undoubtedly aware of Brian Sweeney probably over there, but I don't think that the part owner of the franchise was hanging out with, a second level employee on the management side. So this was not I know this guy in a personal friendly context. That's why I want to hire him. No, it's like this guy is the best guy for the job. And while I wasn't really familiar with Brian Sweeney, one of my frustrations with having Cal Eldred, doing this job for so long was that it wasn't like, oh, the Royals should let go of Cal Eldred because there's one guy out there that they should go out and hire who could do a better job. No, there's dozens, maybe hundreds of potential pitching coaches out there. I don't know all of them. I don't even scratch the surface of some of their names that could do this job. So the fact that I wasn't familiar with Brian Sweeney wasn't necessarily an impediment to the fact that he's a good candidate. And our friend David Lesky had put together a list of some of his favorite options for the job, and Brian was right on that list. And when you actually start digging into his background, there's a lot to like there. He's never done the job before. That's always the caveat here. But given how much the teaching of pitching has been changed by not just what we call quote unquote analytics, but video, high speed video, and some of the hardware that has been developed, Rhapsodo and Edgar Tronic over the last few years, a long track record of experience doing the job isn't necessarily the advantage it used to be. I think somebody who's kind of new to this line of work, if as long as he's familiar with the very recent updates in pitching, technology, is actually completely qualified. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too, and I'm with you on the the timeline. It was getting to the end of what I would call the acceptable timeline, right? But it's an acceptable time, and I wonder, although most things that come about like this are not able to be kept under wraps, you never know. Was this something that was really done for about the last 7 days or something? Did they have it finished up? Who knows? Who cares? They have the guy in place. They have
Right.
their
I
people.
suspect they did, if only because they announced their assistant pitching coach like
Right.
24 hours later. And that's what the thing I was speculating last week, that this may just be a matter of dotting the I's on a contract and getting everything straightened out. And this may have well been in place before Thanksgiving, and it just took some time for them to do it. So
Yeah.
I withdraw any concerns that I had about the timeline. It was deliberate, but it was not a sign of desperation that they hired these guys. I think these are the guys that they targeted all along after a thorough search.
Yeah. I don't think you have to withdraw any concerns. I mean, I think they beat your deadline, right? Like we
Barely,
felt
but they
like
did.
yeah, we felt like that it would be. We would have to be asking, what the hell are you doing if you went to the winter meetings without
Right.
these people in place?
Right. I think to me
And
that was a hard deadline.
yeah, and I simply bring up the idea, and you're right. I think the fact that they line up the assistant pitching coach Zach Bowe from the Minnesota Twins, as well as evidence that this process was probably further along than what we got, when it finally got out there. But they hire a guy with success on his resume, right? The bullpen of the Cleveland Guardians the last 3 years has had the fifth, sixth, and fifth best ERAs, right? Maybe not. I know that's not the best way to measure everything now in the modern. There's all the different numbers, but it's at least a scale that we can all agree on, that we understand, and those numbers are good, right? They're not bad. So I'm not having to tailor it up. Just the easiest, fastest, most traditional way to measure a guy's record. They're good, right? Fifth, sixth, and fifth in all of baseball, not the American League, in all of baseball for reliever ERAs. That's a good start, right? And the things that I've read about him to this point are a guy that's meticulous in his preparation. Cares about the pitching reports, cares about the analytics, comes from an organization that has this kind of background, has the background that they want. That is an analytics driven background, one that will embrace the numbers of the job. And I think that is, I feel good. Like if I didn't think that if they didn't go get somebody from the Guardians, I was going to be disappointed, right? Somewhere at some spot. And I think you mentioned multiple teams. That's a good sign. Both coming from the Minnesota Twins. You're getting, different organizational philosophies, although with a similar focus. That's a pretty good place to start. But to get different ideas coming together and different approaches, hopefully being able to draw the best of each organization. That's the plan with what they've done.
Yeah, no, it is. Brian Sweeney, I mean, you look at his background. This is a guy who pitched in the major leagues. I do very vaguely remember him as a sort of pitching prospect and then a pitcher in the majors. I think he pitched a total of 4 seasons in the major leagues, spread out over 8 seasons. And this was the kind of even if the way he pitched gives me a little bit of satisfaction. I mean, he was a finesse guy who had to survive with guile and command. In 117 major league innings in his entire career, struck out 54 batters, which you and I both know is not necessarily a harbinger of success. Less than one strikeout per 2 innings, and yet he had a 3.38 ERA in his career because he rarely walked guys, didn't give up a lot of home runs. Worked out of the bullpen. I'm sure he had some benefits from that. But this is a guy who pitched, I think, something like 18 years of professional baseball. He pitched 3 years in Japan. Kind of hysterically was on Trey Hillman's Japan World Series winning team. We won't hold that against him, but hopefully this time around the Royals got the right member of the 2007 Japan World Champions.
Which, by the way, it was made clear to me, made him a fighter. Not a ham fighter.
Right.
He's not out
for
fighting
Nippon
ham.
Ham.
Yeah, the Nippon ham, that is part of.
They don't fight ham over there. They like ham. They don't fight it.
As much as I would like him to be out fighting ham, I love the idea of it being the ham fighter.
Soren, I'm Muslim. I would love for him to be out there fighting ham, but unfortunately they are not ham fighters. They're just fighters on behalf of ham. But I mean, he pitched a very long time. with like very marginal stuff. And that's the sort of guy. And also, he's sort of a late convert to the use of analytics, not because he rejected it early in his career, it wasn't available. And then he started his coaching career, I believe, with the Phillies and joined the Guardians organization after 2017. But there's no zealot like a convert, and the reports are there's a good article about him in the Athletic. I think before the 2020 season, he had just been a member of the Guardians at that point for 2 years, and was already considered like a rising star. Like the Guardians actually went out of their way to make sure there was a place for him on their coaching staff, because in essence, I think he saw all this data and video study as the sort of stuff that he wished he had in his career. This is a guy who was always looking for an edge when he was an active pitcher. And so as opposed to someone looking at all this newfangled data and being like, oh, we don't need this, it's quite the contrary for him. It's like, oh, man, I wish I had this when I was pitching. It would make me better. And so he embraced all of that stuff. And it's 5 years now working in the Guardians organization. And I mean, I think it's worth reiterating the kind of success that the Guardians have had. Let's just look at their rotation this year, right? Shane Bieber, who's like a bona fide ace, right? Fourth round pick, college pitcher, fourth round pick, because he was a pitchability guy. Through 4 pitches, manipulated stuff well, could throw breaking stuff, didn't throw that hard. The Guardians taught him velocity, which is, the new thing now. You teach guys how to throw hard. And he's a phenomenal pitcher. Tristan McKenzie was a supplemental first-round pick. Okay, he was supposed to be great, but he was a first-round pick out of high school. You know how horrible the track record is of high school pitchers in the first round. Well, guess what? Tristan McKenzie is the exception to the rule. He came up very promising in 2020, took kind of an adjustment year in 2021, and then this year, 191 innings at 2.96 ERA, 190 strikeouts against 44 walks. He's basically another, ace pitcher, at the very least, and a very good number 2 on that team. Cal Quantrill, who was a first-round pick out of college by the Padres. The Padres traded him in order to get Mike Clevenger a couple years ago after his rookie season when he had an ERA above 5 for the Padres. The Guardians have worked with him. In 2021, he had a 2.89 ERA. This year, a 3.38 ERA in 186 innings. And then your fourth guy, Zach Plesac, who was a 12th round pick out of college, and is not at the level of the other guys, but has a career 4.04 ERA, as a 1.06 ERA plus. Basically a league average, slightly above average starter, who was a late round pick. 12th round pick. That's when John Heasley was taken in the 12th round. Like, it's interesting. 3 of these guys were college pitchers. One was high school. Only one of them was drafted in the top 3 rounds, and they've turned these guys into you think about the Royals 2018 draft with not just Singer, but Kowar and Bubic and Daniel Lynch and all these. Like, the Guardians have taken much less draft capital and turned out a much more successful class of pitching. That's the sort of success that the Royals are desperately looking for. And Brian Sweeney was there for all of it. Whether how much he had to do with it versus how much he just witnessed, I don't know. But he certainly knows the secrets that the Guardians use to get the most out of those guys. And that's a guy I'm excited to bring into the organization to see what he knows and what he can tap into with these pitchers of ours.
I agree. I love the background. We also should mention, bench coach coming from the Rays, so you're getting all these different organizations coming together under one umbrella. What are the expectations now? What should Royals fans? What's a reasonable expectation for this year? That if Brian Sweeney's going to be the real deal, he gets what? One guy turned around, he gets 2 guys turned around, he brings ERA down half a run, a full run. Obviously I'm exaggerating to make a point, but what should be a reasonable expectation for what Brian Sweeney and a new regime and a new coaching staff should be able to do for this Royals pitching? What can happen in 1 year?
You might think you're exaggerating. I'm not sure you are. I mean, bring down the ERA a full run. Well, the Royals had a 4.70 ERA this year, which was 82 points above league average, the worst in the league. So somewhere between 50 and 100 points, 75 points, I think is reasonable. Getting that ERA down around 4.0 from 4.7 is, I think, a reasonable. I think that's the big picture. On the more granular level, Obviously, we're going to assume that Brady Singer does not regress. He maintains what he did. He's been named to Team USA for the World Baseball Classic, which, it's a great honor, and I think it's a sign of the fact that the powers that be in baseball don't look at his season as a fluke. So, I expect that he will maintain his gains. And then, yes, at the bare minimum, one of those three guys I just mentioned, Kowar, Lynch, or Bubic, should take a significant step forward and be an above average major league starter this coming season. If he can turn, I would say Lynch is probably the most likely of that bunch. But between Lynch and Bubic, I mean, both of them have had success at times at the major league level. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that one of those guys becomes at least a good number three, pretty much overnight. This is, there's a long-term plan, and we're not going to judge him after just one season. But it's not like I'm expecting him to take a guy who's in Double-A and make him into an effective starter right away. These are guys who have 2 to 3 years of major league experience already. There's no reason why they can't take a significant step forward.
I agree that we're not going to judge him after just one season, but it's not this. There has to be instant success somewhere, right? Like, to say like, okay, maybe the team ERA only improves by 0.3, I'd be disappointed, but 0.3 of a run, maybe it's 0.5, whatever it might be. But there has to be immediate success. Either Daniel Lynch has to click and you go, okay, now there's Singer and Lynch. To your point, Singer can't regress. You have to be able to continue, the progress of what is already a success story. So you can't be backing him up. You can't fix what ain't broke already. But one of the other young pitchers has to come through as a starting pitcher. Like the Royals have made it look, listen, I cover Kansas football, and I watched them get to a bowl eligibility, and they're going to go to a bowl now. And for years, I'd listen to Kansas fans just sit and say, well, you know what? If we can just get to 500, I'd be satisfied. And it would drive me crazy because, like, that's the easy part, right? Being league average is not hard. And I think it'll scream either terrible hire or that they have done a really bad job of drafting. Right, that these are not big leaguers. And the comments of JJ Piccolo this week, he doubled down again, saying we don't have a development problem. For the most part, you could take it, you could extract from his comments, we don't have a development problem. We have a major league problem. And and it was a little unnerving, to be honest with you, that it seemed to be business as usual in the minor leagues because we feel like we're doing a great job. All of our problems are at the big league level, which certainly speaks to the way that they haven't made a lot of changes down below, that they put it all at the feet of Mike Matheny and Cal Eldred, and they're counting on this group to do it. So, I hope Brian Sweeney's eyes are wide open, that he comes into this job with the idea that, like if you think you're going to be like, no, not him. We need to start making some moves. And they go, no, here's your guy. I mean, I can remember Buddy Bell telling me, his first, when he really realized what getting into coaching was in his first job. They're like, okay, we need you to work with this young third baseman. He worked with the guy for a couple of days, and he goes to the organization. He's like, yeah, this guy sucks. And they're like, well, he's the guy. Like, I mean, we'll get rid of you. If you're telling me you can't turn him around, then you're going to go, not him. He's the guy. And so the Royals are really, I think, by the words of JJ Piccolo, telling Brian Sweeney, telling, all these guys, Zach Bove, that you are coming in and we expect you to turn these guys around. Don't come in and tell us, no, these guys aren't good enough. Fix these guys. And so I think if you put all that together, we've got to see these guys, one or two of these guys, have success and have it, I would say, in the first half of the season, or we're going to be going, what's going on here? Or the Royals are going to have to change their philosophical view of what they actually have on the cupboard.
Right. Piccolo, I certainly see the angle where Piccolo's words worried a lot of Royals fans. I've been doing this long enough to feel like actions are going to have to speak louder than words. So I don't mind him saying those words at the same time that he's hiring not just one, but I think importantly, 2 pitching coaches, which is something that we maybe haven't talked enough about, is the fact that an assistant pitching coach, I'm not sure. I know the Royals have had assistant hitting coaches. I don't recall them ever having an assistant pitching coach. And you and I had talked about the fact that one pitching coach alone wasn't enough. We talked about bringing in like a coordinator for the whole organization, which is sort of a format that a couple of teams are playing around with, having a pitching coach at the major league level, but then kind of a system-wide pitching coordinator. But having an assistant pitching coach who's there, at the major league level, having two guys is certainly better than one. That's something the Royals haven't done before. I think it's an acknowledgement that the problem is kind of too big to be solved by just one person, and also that more people, the more coaches you have, the more work can be done to help more pitchers. My first takeaway from Piccolo's comments, honestly, was, man, he's really throwing Cal Elder under the bus, because and which I'm all for, but my response is, where the hell were you a year ago or 3 years ago, when some of us were talking about the results of this, the pitching on this team being a disappointment and putting the blame at the pitching coach's feet? So, I'm glad he's finally come around on that, but it's a little too late there. But a year ago, if he had made these comments, I would give him a lot more slack about the organization, the problem being at the major league level, not the minor league level, because, we talk about that draft class of 2018 with such promise because they actually did, pitch quite well in the minor leagues. Jackson Kowar, when he got to the major leagues, was dominating at the minor league level. Now, we've heard in the wake of Cal Elder being fired, people talking about how the Royals' problem actually is that they're drafting guys that other teams had already pinpointed as they have stuff that won't work at the major league level but will dominate minor league hitters. So it may still be a drafting problem, but I think, and there are certainly pitchers who can dominate at the minor league level whose stuff does not translate. But I think I'm not sure I've ever seen an organization that consistently drafts pitcher after pitcher that succeeds wildly at the minor league level but fails at the major league level. Most times when you have a pitcher who's a bust, the signs are there pretty early. So I'd be inclined to give them a break on that a year ago. The problem is, this season, the minor league system was just as disappointing as the major league level. Asa Lacy, obviously, being the most obvious one, Alec Marsh being the other one. And those are guys that Cal Elder did not work with between April and September, and they still had a disaster season. I still cannot comprehend what the organization was doing, putting Asa Lacy in Double-A after he couldn't throw strikes in rookie ball coming back from his back injury. So there's clearly more work that needs to be done. But I do like the fact that they brought in a second, like I said, an assistant pitching coach.
Yes.
The fact that he came from a different organization. Like, I assumed one of these pitching coaches would come from Tampa Bay, because that's where Matt Quintero is from, and it's a great organization for it. And I wouldn't have been upset with that. But and the Guardians connection is fine. Is the fact that John Sherman has a connection there, doesn't mean you shouldn't hire from that organization. They know what they're doing. The Zach Bove one really intrigues me, because the Minnesota Twins, you don't really think of them as a analytical organization, but they are kind of sneakily in that second tier of teams that is using a lot more than you would think. Thad Levine, who's their general manager, I actually met him 20 years ago. I spoke at a Sabre convention in 2003 in Denver. He was, at that point, this is just after Theo Epstein had gotten the job as a general manager in Boston. Thad Levine was probably, if you would put a list together of 5 or even 3 guys in major league front offices who could be the next Theo Epstein, the kind of young wonderkind at the forefront of the analytics revolution, Thad Levine would absolutely have been on that list. And I spoke with him briefly there. He was with the Rangers for many years. Then the Twins brought him in. He's their general manager. He's the number 2 because Derek Falvey is president of baseball operations. But that is certainly a team. The Twins had an overhaul in their front office 2 or 3 years ago, and this new front office is much more analytically savvy. Zach Bove was a pitching coach in college. I think the College of Central Florida. And we've talked about how some of the more interesting advances in pitching instruction have been taking place at the college level. So he's done the pitching coach job. He's a big proponent of analytics and using data and video. And yet he comes from a completely different talent tree than Brian Sweeney or Matt Quintero. And I think that's great, because if you want to build an organization from the best practices of other organizations, I want as many organizations represented at the table as possible, because the Guardians might do certain things better than the Rays, but the Twins might have some ideas that the Guardians and Rays have never thought of. and get all those ideas into one room and make an amalgam of the best of best of them. So the fact that he has really no connection, I think the biggest connection I can find is that he actually got his master's degree at the University of Missouri. That's the closest I can find to a Kansas City connection. But he must have just, his reputation must precede him. The Royals must have been very impressed with him in the interview process. And I'm hoping he brings something to the table the other guys don't. They talk about him as the strategist. JJ Piccolo used that term, he'll be the strategist. And I'm not entirely sure what that means, but my understanding is that one of the things he did in Minnesota was helping pitchers design their pitches. Right. And by design, we're talking about finger placement on the ball to get your slider to break more or get more, rise on your fastball, more movement on your pitches. That is one of the things the Royals have really been failing at. And if that's his area of expertise, that is something they absolutely can use. So I just really like the fact that they're getting multiple people, multiple areas of expertise, multiple experts with different focuses in the room. That is what I'm putting my hope on, that one of these guys, or maybe two of these guys in the rotation, will take a step forward.
It shows an expansion of spending too, right? Like we've talked about, and we'll see what maybe the salaries will come out, and we'll figure out that, hey, they want a bidding war on this guy, but more coaching, right? That's one of the things we heard about the Rays. There is no shortage of coaches to go to if you have an issue, if you have a question. There's no shortage of people to go to that will sit down and work with you in whatever way it may be, whether it's analytics or film or up on a mound or however it is, in front of the video cameras, getting it all figured out. There's no shortage of coaches that are there, and the Royals seem to be building out their coaching staff. So this is one thing that, yes, it does seem to be that they're pointing towards the major problem, or really the heart and soul of the problem being only at the big league level. However, they're addressing it with multiple people. So I do think that's important. They're spending. This is increased spending. And we've talked about it. It doesn't cost as much to spend on coaches as it does. $13.5 million for Zach Greinke. You can hire a lot of pitching people, right? For the $13.5 million you put into Zach Greinke. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind here, that when you talk about having an assistant pitching coach, that's one of the things that they've done here. I think that is and I think if you look at the expenditure, you mentioned, some of the Guardians pitchers, total amount spent on their pitching staff last year, $18.8 million. Right? We can talk about where they're at. The bullpen. Yeah, the bullpen is even cheaper. And from the Twins standpoint, only $13.8 million spent on the pitching as a whole. If you look up what they had for there. So you're talking about guys that understand working with, something less than a rotation of Scherzer, Kershaw, the guys that they're basically just babysitting, and giving them, hey, do you need a cup of coffee, Mr. Scherzer? Okay, let me run fetch that for you. That's not at all what these guys have come from. They've come from guys that clearly, were not the top of the food chain, and yet they were still getting very good production, particularly in the Guardians case, getting very good production from them. So I think that is important, and I think that's a good way to look at it. That being said, free agency is underway, Rany, if we were to turn the page here and look at something else. And
I'll have to take your word for it, because
yeah,
the Royals have not engaged. The Royals are not even been rumored to be engaged in the free agency process.
No. And I don't think anybody thought that they were going to get in the middle of a 5-year, $185 million bidding war for Jacob deGrom. By the way, how about that Dayton Moore influence already down in Texas? You'd see, let's go get deGrom.
Just like in Kansas City, his first year, 5-year contract to a right-handed starter. Jacob deGrom, a little bit higher on the pecking order than Gil Mesh. But speaking of the Rangers, I just want to mention, the Rangers just rehired Mike Maddox as their pitching coach, and I just think it's an interesting sort of comparison. I mean, I don't think Dayton Moore had a huge influence on that necessarily, and Mike Maddox had been their pitching coach in Texas before. But Mike Maddox is an example of a guy who had a reputation as one of the better pitching coaches in the game 10 years ago. Right, he was their pitching coach in Texas when they went to back-to-back World Series. But the game has changed so much over the last 10 years. I'm much happier with a relative no-name like Brian Sweeney. That intrigues me a lot more than if the Royals had gone and signed Mike Maddox to be their pitching coach.
Mike Maddox was one of my favorites. So he has had a lot of success. And you're right, it's a different world, and he may be trapped in 2005, but his early stints were very good as a pitching coach.
Right. And I mean, look, he may still be on the top of the game. I mean, just because a guy has been around a long time doesn't mean he can't adjust. Brent Strom was considered one of the worst pitching coaches in baseball, forced to work for the Kansas City Royals lowly franchise 20 years ago, and now is considered the best pitching coach of the century. So, it just took, in Brent Strom's case, it took the rest of baseball 20 years to catch up to him. But it is possible to keep up with the times. But I just feel like what a guy did in that job 10 years ago has relatively little bearing to what he can do today, because the job is so utterly different than it was in 2010.
We're talking Royals baseball here on the Kaufman Corner podcast, proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the entire Kansas City area, no matter where you are, Lee Summit, OP, Olathe, Independence, Leavenworth, it don't matter. They cover it. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, every project coming with a written warranty. Find them online right now at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Tell them you heard about them here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. If you've got a business, if you've got a parking lot of any kind, Gann Asphalt and Concrete services them all, whether it's churches, hotels, businesses, you name it, they do it. Everything when it comes to parking lots, Gann Asphalt and Concrete has you covered. Tell them Rany Jazayerli, Soren Petro sent you from the Kaufman Corner podcast. Rany, you mentioned free agency. We kind of made a little joke that, okay, I'll have to take your word for it, right? Because we haven't seen really anything out of the Royals. But do we think that, we didn't expect them, like I said, $185 million with Jacob deGrom. We didn't think they were going to get in on that. We didn't see him going after Jose Abreu, the big boy shopping that's going on out there. But in the second wave, I will say this, I'm going to be disappointed if there isn't some kind of acquisition made, right? Like after the dust settles, there generally speaking is like you're usually overspending in this part. The top end is a gross over expenditure that is really reserved for teams that think they're one or two players away. Fine. I'm fine with them not spending, but they do have to spend something. They've got $30+ million to spend.
No, look, their payroll last year, and there's we've talked about many different ways to calculate it, but as a general figure, was less than their payroll every year basically between 2015 and 2018. It was right around where they were in 2014 and 2019, and that was last year. This, and right now, if you make reasonable projections for what players are going to make in arbitration, because they have a lot of arbitration eligible players. But they have like 3 guys under contract for the coming year for $32 million. So even after you throw in all the arbitration guys, their payroll looks to be somewhere in the range of $16 million less than last year. Now, Zach Greinke has not been re-signed. Let's give them Zach Greinke. I think they want him to come back. I think it really is just the ball's in Zach's court if he wants to come back for another year. I would certainly hope that if he chooses not to, that they will reapportion that money and go out and get somebody to fill that role. But let's assume that they have Greinke. They're $6 million less right now than they were this past season, even accounting for all the raises that their arbitration guys are going to get. Brady Singer is obviously going to get a big pay jump, etc. In a year where inflation is 8% and payrolls around baseball are going to no doubt reflect that. The average team's payroll is going to go up quite a bit. And the Royals are presumably looking to take a step forward, both because they want to win and also because they would love to get the public on their side with that stadium that they want to build. I think they need to spend some money. Neither one of us is talking about hitting the luxury tax threshold, which they're like $100 million away from, but spending $20 to $30 million on top of the Zach Greinke contract is perfectly reasonable. At least $15 million, and $15 million will get you a quality free agent. And we just saw Zach Eflin sign with the Rays. The Rays, mind you, who don't spend a lot of money. In fact, one of the teams spend the least amount of money. And they swooped in and stole Zach Eflin away from the Red Sox, apparently. And Zach Eflin is one of those. There's like a half dozen right-handed pitchers who are like number 3 starters who might, if you pick the right guy and you bet right, might get a number 2 starter out of him. Zach Eflin's one of them. The Orioles just signed Kyle Gibson, who's maybe a half step behind Zach Eflin. I'd probably have Eflin higher on my pecking order, but a guy who will help. Like there are guys out there, and if the Royals really want to bet on their in-house pitching and the improvements that Brian Sweeney and Zach Bove are going to make, fine, go out and sign an outfielder. Michael Conforto, I would love to see that guy in a Royals uniform. Mitch Haniger, we talked about. There are guys out there. They sign one dude. Make us actually believe. So the fact that they have not been even rumored. Now the Royals are good about staying off the rumor. I mean, we didn't know about Brian Sweeney until the last moment. That's something Dayton Moore put in place 15 years ago, and the Royals have been a pretty tight ship ever since. So if they got something up their sleeve, great. But it's the winter meetings time, and guys are already signing, and a lot more guys are going to come off the the board here in the next week. So if you wait too long, they're going to be gone. So we need to see something happen.
All right, so what do we make of the? We've had a couple of folks mention it here in the chat room. By the way, if you're catching us via the podcast, thank you very much. Make sure you hit that like button, the subscribe button, the love button. Always appreciate that. Helps us a lot. Doesn't cost you nothing. So go for it right now. We do stream live Sunday nights normally. Sometimes that gets bounced over to Monday, but normally Sunday nights at 10 p.m. Central Time. So if you want to catch us, you can be a part of the conversation on Facebook, on Twitch, and on YouTube as the comment section rolling. But MJ Melendez, a lot of talk that maybe there's some conversations going on with MJ Melendez. I think it was Andy Rogers who said that MJ Melendez is out of the picture. They're not going to listen to anything on MJ Melendez. I hope that's not true. You should, if you're going to be truly analytically driven, you will listen to anybody. Anyone is available. They're all available. Right. If you're going to be driven by analytics. Otherwise, we're still trapped in the Dayton Moore era of we want you to be able to wear your jersey for many years out to the ballpark, and that cannot be the focus if you're going to win. I think making this roster fit, that's something that you can do without spending money, just by trading and shaping it and getting talent back at positions that you need. You mentioned outfielder. They definitively, in my opinion, need an RBI bat, right? Need a run production bat in the outfield, right-handed bat. They have to find it. Making the right, if MJ Melendez is going to catch and you're not going to move on from Salvador Perez, you've got to make some kind of declaration about what that man is.
To say that, we're not going to trade him to Melendez. Okay, what are you doing with him? If there's anybody on this team that you should at least entertain offers for, it's the guy who has the widest range, not in what he can become, but in what people perceive him to be today. Because if you perceive him to be a starting everyday catcher, he's already a star. He's already one of the 5 best hitting catchers in the American League as a rookie with room to grow. If, on the other hand, you believe that he is such a poor pitch framer and we're not going to see automated balls and strikes here in the next couple of years, that he shouldn't be catching at all, that he should be a full-time corner outfielder, well, you could have that impression and still believe he's going to be a very good player because you believe in that bat, that he's going to develop into exactly what you're talking about, an RBI guy. A guy could hit 30 to 40 home runs and has the plate discipline to have a 350 OBP. That's still a very valuable player. Or you might think that he's a corner outfielder who's going to not develop much as a bat, in which case he's barely an everyday guy at all. There's such a wide range that if I'm the Royals, and I personally am not sure which of those is the case. I think that him being an everyday catcher is pretty unlikely, to be perfectly honest. And so my inclination is if there is a team out there that values him like he's a catcher, I'm all ears. Because that they'll be willing to pay a pretty penny for a guy who could be an all-star catcher. Yeah. So this idea of putting him, of all people, off limits just seems silly to me because I don't know what he is. If somebody else thinks he's going to be a superstar, maybe let them take that gamble and get a superstar's worth of return in trade.
I think the one thing you can't do is spend 3 years trying to figure it out. This is what I'm expecting from the new wave is this guy's a player, this guy's not. This guy moves, this guy stays. This guy plays here, this guy plays there. This idea of 3 and 4 years. I mean, as we've come on, we've talked about it until we're blue in the face. Particularly, whether it's Adalberto Mondesi, waiting on him to finally become an everyday guy, or it's I've got pitching block right now because I don't want Brad. Keep wanting to call him Brad Radke, but
Kyle Davies?
who?
Kyle Davies?
No,
You could be thinking
On the
100 guys.
team right now that he's going into his 6th
Oh,
year.
Brad Keller.
Brad Keller, thank you. Like that crap's got to stop, right? You've got to be able to identify, like, if Brad Keller ends up being like this is the mindset that has to change. Here's the other thing that concerned me about a comment that I read from JJ Picola the other day. Might as well have been Dayton Moore. Was well, the quantity of pitchers that have pitched for the Royals from the 2018 draft. That is still the old way of thinking that we got him to the big leagues. That's a success. No, it's not. Your goal, this is not the Make-A-Wish Foundation, right? Your goal is not to deliver the dream of being a big leaguer to guys or get them a little service time. And it's sure as hell not to make sure that Brad Keller has 5 years of service time and can draw a pretty good pension. The goal is to win baseball games. And that mindset has to change. They have to be able to figure out what guys are, make the roster fit. And that's why when I hear MJ Melendez not available, I hope that's just posturing to keep his trade value up. So that if anyone's like, let's go kick the tires on MJ Melendez because the Royals have probably soured on him. He can't really catch. He doesn't have a position. We should be able to get him cheap and we can fix him. Oh, no, he's not. We're not talking about him. As a stance of, no, we still believe in him. This is a superstar about ready to explode. Okay, fine. But if you stay the course with MJ Melendez, you're in the get it right business and he has to be good.
So right. And not only that, if they want to say, look, we believe MJ Melendez is X, great. But I want to know what X is. If they believe that he is an everyday corner outfielder, that he will be an above average hitter and he'll be able to learn defense. Cause he wasn't exactly a great defensive outfielder either, but I'll give him a pass for that, given that it was really his first year playing the outfield, at any level. If they believe that's what he is, I want to hear that. I want to know, I want them to commit to the idea of him being a championship caliber left fielder. But this idea of, we're going to let him catch 50 times a year and have him play outfield, he's never going to become, he's a poor defensive catcher. He's not going to get better watching Salvador Perez play that position 2/3 of the time. And it's almost without precedent for a player to play catcher part-time, play the outfield part-time in the same season, and actually be valuable defensively. You can make that work maybe as an offensive, but his bat is not worth the amount of runs that he was costing the team in terms of pitch framing behind the plate. That is an underrated reason for why the pitching sucked this year. It's not the only reason, not the main reason, but it is a reason. So they need to address that. And I just feel like them futzing around with him as a catcher, it's, like moving Bobby Witt back and forth between shortstop and third base. I think for the sake of these guys' development, pick a position, let them develop at it, make them great at it.
Yeah, I am feeling a little snarky tonight, to be honest with you. But I'm excited that things are starting to move. I just wish they would move faster. But I think there are important things that have to happen for this organization to be better. And I don't want them to just change the nameplates, right? Like you got to change what you do. And I think the best thing, and I put it up there. Somebody said, talked about. They've got to be able to figure out their own guys first. Like the way I describe it is you have to, when you look in the mirror, you have to accurately see what's there. And I think the Royals kid themselves into thinking a lot more is there. MJ Melendez is a good bat without a position. At 40 home runs, to be honest with you, what's the most likely outcome for him, MJ Melendez? He should have been part of a Will Myers deal before he ever got to the big leagues.
There was certainly a lot fewer questions about his catching ability a year ago. And he led the freaking minor leagues in home runs last year. Like we said this before the season, if you're and you had Salvador Perez signed to a long-term deal, like the one cornerstone of the franchise played that position. So even if you did think he could catch, it wasn't clear he was going to be able to use that talent every day. So the obvious thing to do would have been if you had put him on the market this past winter and just said to the other 29 teams in baseball, we're putting him on the market because we have 2 starting catchers. We can only play one of them. His trade value would not have taken it. Everyone would have understood. They've got Salvador Perez. They're not moving the captain, Not moving the World Series MVP from 2015, they could have gotten a king's range. They would have gotten another top 50 prospect in the sport for MJ Melendez. I don't think you can get that for him now, even though he had a decent rookie season at the plate, because the positional value, the defensive questions are there now. So yes, they need to be a little more decisive. I'm going to pin that one on Dayton Moore, because there's one thing we know about Dayton Moore is he would never move a player he believes in, even if it made sense from a transactional standpoint. But Dayton Moore's gone now, and it's time for JJ Picollo to make some bold decisions. And if they decide they believe in MJ Melendez's bat, I won't blame them for sticking with him, because his trade value has taken a hit. So if you put him out there now, you're not going to get that value, and you may think he's more valuable to us because we do think he can become an elite middle of the order hitter. But do that as a left fielder and stop futzing around with him as a catcher.
Couple comments, and then we'll move. Let's be brief on this. But Brian Reynolds' name's come up a couple of times. Some people have talked about it. You like him for the Pirates? If the Pirates are willing to move him, 25, 6, 7 home runs last year off the top of my fantasy baseball head. I'm going to guess. I don't know.
You were right. I like Brian Reynolds.
7 last year.
Yeah, no, you were on. He's a good player. He's demanded a trade, which I didn't know you could do that in baseball anymore. Like, you can demand all you want, but he's with them until they decide to trade him, and I don't think he's going to hold out. This is not 1937 anymore, where you hold out. That's what arbitration is there for. So but they're certainly willing to at least listen. I'm looking 3 years, I think he's got of service time. Yeah, so you would have him for 3 seasons. He is a very good player. I mean, he's basically averaged over 4 wins above replacement per full season in the major leagues. And he's played center field the last 2 years. Now, his defensive numbers there are not great. He's more of a left fielder. I think if you trade for him, and it's certainly, if Melendez is part of that trade, then it makes sense. You put him in left field. He's actually, I think, a good left fielder. I think he's stretched a bit in center. It's worth kicking the tires on. You're taking a guy you're going to have for 6 seasons and turning him into a guy you're going to have for 3. But if it's not a 1-year rental. It's not a 2-year rental. And Reynolds is a very good player in the prime of his career. He'll be 28 this season. I
know what he is. I know what maybe he's not center field, but I know he's an outfielder, for God's sake, which is something that they don't know about half their roster.
If Melendez would be the bulk of the trade, you'd probably have to throw in more than that, but I'm not throwing in 2 or 3 players of Melendez caliber. If Melendez is, 70% of the trade haul you'd have to give up. You have to give up one other, decent prospect. It's something I would consider, because, like you said, what he is, and what he is a really good player, and I think he'll be a good player for the next 3 years for the life of that contract.
How long is the leash for JJ Picollo? What are you feeling right now? I'm saying it's 2 years. Like, he'll
2
get
years. This year, no matter what happens, I just be very. It's not even if he proved he deserved to be to be fired if they had a disastrous season. I just think the message you send, especially after bringing in new coaches and overhauling everything, you'd be sending a message as an owner that you're too impatient if you bailed after 1 year. I think 2 years as a bare minimum, but I think 2 years is a fair amount of time, because it's not like he's new to the organization. And I think 2 years is a reasonable expectation for this team to be a contender. 2024, 12 playoff teams, you can contend. And you might contend in 2023.
Expectations for the winter meetings are what? Kansas City.
My expectation is probably that the Royals will make a Rule 5 pick. I guess that might be the biggest. That sometimes, as a Royals fan, that's sometimes the highlight of the winter meetings every year, is just that they add, the one player they add ends up being a guy in the Rule 5. I was looking this up. The last 13 players they've drafted in the Rule 5 draft were pitchers. I mean, they always draft an arm, which it makes sense, but it was kind of striking. It's been 18 years since they drafted a hitter. I think it was Ronnie Paulino, who was a catcher, who actually ended up a couple years later sticking in the majors as a catcher, and they didn't keep him. But I see them taking an arm, and I mean, the Royals have some success doing that. I mean, Brad Keller, obviously, Joakim Soria, even more obviously. Andy Cisco had a really good year for them as a Rule 5 pick way back when. Like the Rule 5 draft, the Royals have gotten more value out of the Rule 5 draft than almost any other team in the last
Well,
25
they're
years.
always picking at the top of it. I mean,
That's part of it. That certainly
there's
helps.
generally speaking a handful of guys that people think could be legitimate contenders, and the Royals predominantly have been one of the first teams to pick, so they ought to be fairly good at it. Let's be honest. I mean, it's actually it's not a badge of honor. I'll be honest with you.
No, it's not. Well, I mean, the ultimate badge of honor is that on some level that you have so much talent, other teams are picking from you. I mean,
Right.
the Royals rarely have guys drafted from, and on the one hand, you don't want to lose talent, and if you're losing, if teams are drafting off of your team because you misjudged your players, that's embarrassing. There was the classic. This is maybe 15 years ago. The Pirates, as they are wont to do, had just terrible management. 4 of the first 5 players in the Rule 5 draft were drafted off of the Pirates' 40-man roster. To the point where in the ballroom where they were holding the winter meeting, they were holding the Rule 5 draft, there was like snickering. After the 4th guy, there was audible laughing in the room that every other team in baseball was selecting from the Pirates, who weren't even a good team. And at least I think one of those guys might have been Chris Shelton, who ended up, the Tigers took him and was like their starting first baseman for 2 or 3 years. So they actually got burned a little bit. So you don't want to be that team. But if you're a team that's just got so much talent that you can't stuff 45 players on a 40-man roster, good for you. The Rays are actually in that position. The Rays have made several trades in the last 2 weeks where they have traded guys off of their 40-man roster for younger prospects who are not yet 40-man eligible, because they knew that as the way their roster was constructed, they were going to expose 5 or 6 guys who were just going to be picked in the draft because they are so good at developing talent. That's a wonderful problem to have. That's a problem I wish the Royals had. Geez, we just have so much talent, we can't keep it all. The Royals have not been there in quite some time. And until they get there, I suppose I wouldn't be averse to them taking a lottery pick, a flyer on some pitcher out there.
Yeah, and that's what we expect, right? I saw Trevor TJ Sikkema.
Yep.
This comment,
That's the one guy they might lose that we had talked about as a guy that they probably should have. That he was on our list of guys they should have protected. You know what? That whose roster spot who got that roster spot instead was Ryan O'Hearn. So it all comes back down to Ryan O'Hearn on some level. It always comes back around to Ryan. Yeah, I mean, they have one roster spot. I think they have 39 on the roster currently, which means they have one spot available to draft. I'm glad they protected Alec Marsh and Diego Hernandez. Those are the guys I would have been more concerned about losing. Sycamore would be more embarrassing, I think, just because they just traded for him in the Andrew Benintendi trade. But Beck Way to me was probably the best guy they got in that trade anyway. And I think it's a reasonable gamble to leave him off in the sense that there are, because of, we're still kind of working our way through like the pandemic and the lack of the minor league season. It's been very difficult for teams to evaluate minor league prospects. And there are lots and lots of players out there that might get drafted from all 30 teams. So this might be a year you can sneak a guy through, just because other teams, if teams are interested in drafting a Rule 5 guy, there are so many other pitchers out there who might be even more promising than TJ is.
Yeah, I like what Matt said. The Rays manage a 40-man roster like no other. Agreed. I think they do a fantastic job of that.
Let's hope Contreras brings that with him.
I will say this: I'm optimistic that we see something done in the Rule 5. I'm optimistic that we see them shuffle some pieces. I'm fine if the names are not big, right? I'm fine if they're signing under the radar guys. But I guess I will. I love the angry face on the Ryan O'Hearn. The little angry emojis right there. I'll do it quietly. I'll be angry quietly if they don't do anything. And I'll say, okay, well, it's a new coaching staff. They want to get in and see what they've got in-house before they go out there. Okay. I don't know. Are you data-driven? Like, what do you really need to see guys throw on the backfields and surprise Arizona to figure out what they are? Like, I don't know how that is suddenly, going to tell you what they are. The back of their baseball card is a lot of who they are, right? And if you're data-driven, you've got the pitch FX and all the, you've got the spin rates on everything. Dive in. You got to be able to start making some conclusions about what you got. And I would really like to see them be, active, and I'd like to see this roster start to take shape and have it look like a real team. I,
Yeah,
I
like,
will grin and bear it for a year. I will
well,
grin and bear it
as
for a
will
year.
I. I mean, what you're saying is all true, but if there ever was a year where they might get a pass from us or pass from the fans for not doing a lot personnel wise, it would be this year because look, either you believe that that quality pitching construction can make these guys better or you don't. You and I both believe that you can make them better. And if you can, then if they make the argument that we believe the guys we have are better than they have shown and we're going to get it out of them, I will at least certainly bite my tongue until April. I will give them the chance to prove that. Right? I still think that but I think just where the payroll is right now, I think you can have your cake and eat it too. You can. There's no rule that says you can't make your team better with better coaching and make your team better by adding better players. Let's see if they can do both. I would like them to do both. I will be disappointed if they don't. But ultimately, if I knew for a fact that Brian Sweeney and Zach Bove are going to do what Cal Eldred couldn't, and we talk about bring that ERA, there's so much low hanging fruit. Bring that ERA down, bring the walks down. My God, I mean, the Royals led the league in the most walks allowed. You want to set benchmarks for the coming season. Knock that walk rate down by at least half a walk per 9 innings. They were at 3.7. They can get that down to 3. There's so many pitchers in this organization who should be throwing more strikes. If they just throw more strikes, they're going to be, a lot better right there. So I will give them a pass if they don't do much, but I just don't think those two things are mutually exclusive.
Anything you want to finish on? Any final
Uh,
parting thought? Any moment of wisdom?
I'm tapped out. I mean, it's the winter meetings, which are always, the funnest time of year. It would be nice to see the Royals relevant during the winter meetings. But that may be a tall ask for them to do this year. I look forward to the day where the Royals are always a big name at the winter meetings because they're a contender, because they're a winner. And like we see with the Chiefs, everybody wants to know what a winner is doing for the future. So that's not something that can be fixed this week, but it is certainly something to shoot for in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I do think laying the groundwork for some trades. A lot of times we hear deals that don't come around until the trade deadline, and you find out, well, we talked about this in the winter meetings, and it ends up happening later. They need to be laying a lot of groundwork. They need to be letting people know, that they're open for business, and they need to be targeting individuals. And if they don't get something done, that's fine. Trading is where they're going to be more active. I think the free agency. I think the guys that they sign are going to be on the bottom end, finishing off the roster, because anyone of quality is not going to want to sign on. If you come to the Royals are either going to grossly overpay or you're coming to try to resurrect your career, which I'm fine with a number of 1-year contract guys that
absolutely can work. Michael Taylor was that guy 2 years
Yes.
ago, and that's been a very useful acquisition at low cost. So
Ideally, they would be signed, prove themselves, and traded for younger players that can be a part of the equation. I think the Royals forget that. They get a guy like,
certainly if you are not contending, as they were not contending for the last 2 years. Yes.
Yeah. Michael Taylor comes over, plays well, and immediately he's their center fielder for the next decade. Like, that cannot be the mindset for this team. So I'd like to see a mindset change. I'd like to see him get some groundwork done. I think trading is going to be more of what they do this time of year. But you've got new people in place, and if they look at this roster the same way, that's impossible. It's impossible for Matt Quatraro to be like, yeah, I like all the same guys Dayton did. I like all the same guys Mike Matheny did. It's impossible for new pitching coaches to be like, I like all the same pitchers that Cal Eldred did. That's impossible. It's impossible. So there has to be some attrition. There has to be some change that happens in that groundwork.
Yeah, that's a succinct way to put it. Like a team that went 65-97 this past season.
Yes.
You just common sense would dictate that a team that went 65-97 1 year probably should bring back not everybody the following season. And yet right now the Royals roster today is essentially unchanged from the team that lost 97 games. And yes, Winters is young, but it's aging quickly, and the winter meetings are absolutely a time where you should see some changes. So
I'm fine with, and I thought Danny Klingscale, who comes on with me on Fridays, did a nice job of asking, we played it, asking JJ Piccolo about, like, well, which is this team? Is it the team that you thought you had in spring training that was supposed to be doing better, hence all the changes have come, or is it the team that lost 97 games? And he really wouldn't answer it, although he did say, turning around previously, it said turning around a 97 loss team, you generally don't go to a 95 win team the next year. Okay, that hints at you think it's actually bad. The history tells us that with having lost 97, 88, what would have been, I think, a 96 loss season, I think the 433 win percentage.
Actually, that year was their high point, believe it or not. They would have lost 92.
Yeah, okay. 92. So you're talking about had they played full seasons, 97, 88, 92, 103, 104. What are you? The anomaly is the 88 loss, is the 74 and 88. That's not what you are. So if you acknowledge that, if what you see in the mirror is a team that's a 90-plus loss team, then there should be plenty of changes. Nobody's job is safe. It's clear you're not good enough. There should be a lot of activity. And let's get going.
Right now, the biggest difference between the 2023 Royals as constructed now and the 2022 Royals is they don't have that Greinke and they don't have Andrew Benintendi because, who was one of their best players before they traded him at the deadline. So you'd like to see improvement somewhere. And yes, a lot of it will come from in-house, but it's okay to explore the other 29 organizations and see if maybe somebody played for them last year can play for you next year.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. All right. Remember, we're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, serving the entire Kansas City metro area, nationally recognized full-serving paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. They're the best in the business. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Tell them you heard about them here on Kaufman Corner for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. My name is Soren Petro. Thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.